Hello, everyone. We are expecting a few more people, so as I talk, I will be busy letting more people into the meeting. But thank you very much for joining us today at our third ever knowledge sharing event. And these are member-only events, and they provide a platform for members to share their knowledge with other members. And today's topic is how to run a successful campaign. Campaigning is the bread and butter of what we all do. We all raise awareness of neurological conditions and fight for better support for those who suffer them. And campaigning gives people with neurological conditions a voice. Collectively, through the Neurological Alliance of Scotland, our members can campaign on common issues, such as social security and improving mental health support. And yet, campaigning is complex and challenging, and it can be hard to measure success. That is why we picked how to run a successful campaign as a topic for today's event. We want to pick the brains of different campaigners to see what lessons they've learned, what approach they've taken, and how they plan a campaign from start to finish. We've aimed to provide a good cross-section of charities in our panel. We have one small charity and 3 large charities. 3 of the charities are based in Scotland and 1 is UK-wide. 1 represents all neurological conditions, and the other 3 are condition specific. Our 4 speakers today are Emily Holmes, Charity Coordinator from Neuro Hebrides, based in Stornoway on the Isle of Lewis, Ross Cunningham, Policy and Communications Manager from Epilepsy Scotland, based in Glasgow, Susan Webster, Head of Policy and Campaigns from MND Scotland, also based in Glasgow. And finally, we have Una Farrell, who is Head of Communications from the Migraine Trust, which is based in London. Before I hand over to them to introduce themselves, we'd like to run a quick poll to get a taste for who's in the room and what you're hoping to get out of today's session. So I will try and launch the poll now. Can everyone see a poll? Yeah. And I don't know if you can see the second, there's 2 questions, you should be able to answer both of them. That's it. Okay, I can see you're filling them in now. So let's leave it another minute while everyone finishes that. Is anyone having trouble with the poll, or is that okay? Just general nods? Yeah. Okay, well, I will end the poll and share the results. And I don't know where it's gone. Can you see the results? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. I will move on. Is the poll, just out of interest, because I can't see it, is it still in the middle of your screens? No, has it gone? No, it's still in the middle of the screens.
I think you can close it though. Yeah, you can close it.
Let me just try and find out where it's got to. There we go. Thank you. Great. Okay, thanks for that. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. That's really helpful for the panelists to see who's in the room and what you're hoping to get out of today's event. So over to the panelists. Each of them has 5 minutes to introduce themselves, and we will start with Emily.
Hi there. My name is Emily Holmes. I'm Charity Coordinator for Neuro Hebrides, based on the Isle of Lewis, but we cover the whole of the Outer Hebrides, so that's 10 inhabited islands, and there's quite a high percentage of people in the Hebrides with neurological conditions. So we're a very small charity. It's a support charity, really, but we have quite a wide remit. But my background, really, I mean, I started working for Neuro Hebrides just in May last year, which coincided, which I've just found out, with when the initial campaign first was initiated. Well, when Keith from MS Society approached one of our members, was exactly the same day that I started my new job. So I'm quite new to this. My background is as a community ranger, so I've worked a lot with community groups in the past, but not as a campaigner. So when I started working for Neurohebrides, it transpired that the specialist MS nurse and the Parkinson's nurse and the epilepsy nurse were soon to be changed into a general neurology nurse, which obviously for people with the MS and epilepsy and Parkinson's means they're going to lose their specialist nurse and not have the specialist care that they need. And when you're on a remote island like this, it's quite difficult for patients to access the neurologist and the specialist care that they need, because we have to go to Glasgow, which for a lot of people, as you can imagine, is really, really quite difficult. So on my first day, I received an email saying this campaign could be about to start, so would you be able to get involved? And not having any experience in campaigning before, but it's been such an important piece of work to be done, I tried to get behind it wholeheartedly, really, and do everything that I could to help with the campaign. So I'm coming to this meeting really as quite new to campaigning, but it's been a real learning curve. And there's been things that haven't gone so well on the way, but there's also been an awful lot of things that have come out of it. It's been really, really beneficial for a lot of people. So that's me.
Thank you very much, and well within your time. So yeah, we're looking forward to hearing more about the what you've been doing to campaign for specialist nurses in the Western Isles. Thank you very much. We are moving on to Ross next. Ross, you have 5 minutes.
Cheers. Thanks, Alice. And yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I guess just a wee introduction to myself. Yeah, Policy and Communications Manager, Epilepsy Scotland. I've been with the charity for just under 6 months now. Before that, I was with Scottish Autism and Media and Policy. I've also worked in politics as well, so I've got a bit of experience of political campaigning. So I've worked for politicians at both Westminster and Holyrood, including Ash Regan, who's standing to be our next First Minister as well. Before working in politics, I worked for St Johnstone Football Club as Media and Communications Manager, and also do a bit of my own sort of campaigning around mental health and outdoors through a website that I run called Mountains Men Minds. So yeah, a little bit background about myself, and I suppose what we're working on just now with Epilepsy Scotland specifically is a campaign around mental health and epilepsy. Since I came into the charity, for speaking to different departments around the charity and learning about it, mental health is such an obvious subject to do some campaigning around, and so we launched that on the 30th of January, and it's around a national survey, and it's really just to understand the experience of people living with epilepsy across Scotland, which is estimated to be around 58,000, to understand what their experience of the impact of epilepsy on their mental health. So we're at the sort of beginning stages of probably a wider campaign. We're not got to that stage yet of deciding which way to go with it. This is really a listening exercise through this campaign and through this survey to understand the experience of people across Scotland, and then to maybe look for solutions and what can maybe press for once we've got all the responses in. So in terms of promoting the survey that we've got just now, we thought it'd be important to do a launch around it. So just before the launch of it on the 30th of January, I thought it'd be quite good to get politicians involved in what we're doing, but also try to convey the lived experience of people with epilepsy as well. So as it happens, there's an MSP who lives with epilepsy, and he's also the convener of the Epilepsy Cross Party Group, Alistair Allen, and he was delighted to help with the launch of the campaign. There was also a former Labour MP, Daniel Rowley, who lives with epilepsy, and she was happy to be involved. So we involved the launch around one former MP and one current MSP living with epilepsy to launch that, and we did that with a photo call up Calton Hill in Edinburgh, calling on people to take part in that. We did a little bit of engagement as well with MSPs from across party to do some promotional work around it as well, to get some, even just to get some photos taken with the board that promotes the campaign, which is called "It's Time to Talk About Epilepsy." But a kind of key part, and I would recommend this to everybody around this, if you're doing your own sort of campaign around it and you want to get that political involvement as well to help kind of spread the reach of it. It's really worked, I think it's worked quite effectively with us so far. So when I worked for, when I was working in the Scottish Parliament, what was quite a common thing would be for the central office of, would be the SNP central office would send a template press release around all the different offices to highlight maybe something the government's done well or something like that. And each office could do like their own sort of local version of that and send it to the local press. So with that sort of idea in mind, and I know that offices in the Parliament would usually use that sort of format, I thought, well, what if we made a template press release from Epilepsy Scotland that would highlight the survey? It would have the specific figures of how many people we estimate in each constituency are living with epilepsy for that politician then to send to the local press. And that's worked really well. With, I think, actually looking at it, we've probably had about 20 MSPs that have done at least that, where they've at least sent it to the press. So it's shown up in different parts of the country, in the Highlands, Argyll and Bute, Edinburgh, Dumfries and Galloway, Stirling, all these different parts of Scotland. So that's worked really well. So we're putting the work in to give that template press release there, and then it's been taken on by the politician for them to send out, and we attached a graphic as well if they want to print out a wee board for them to have a photo taken with it. So that's worked really well. And just kind of one last thing in the last 40 seconds with my 5-minute clip, I think just to highlight, there's quite a lot of things there, and also to mention Anna Telfer, who's on the call just now, Policy Campaigns Officer with Epilepsy Scotland, done a lot of great work into this campaign as well. But just to highlight the importance of video content, I think that's videos are a great way. I'm somebody that's got a master's in film studies and have kind of a video background. I realise the importance of, in any campaign that I've done in the past, especially ones that I think have been particularly effective, have included videos. So we've used that as part of our campaign so far, including politicians promoting the survey through videos, and we've got plans for a more kind of wider video to use as part of the campaign as well. So I just really want to highlight that, because it's a great way to engage with people and get engagement in social media. But that's my 5 minutes. Hopefully somebody's learned something from that.
Brilliant. Yeah, that was literally to the second. So thank you very much for that, Ross. Next we have got Susan, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay, Alice?
Sorry, yeah, I was nodding, but yes, more helpful for me to speak. Yes,
right. Sorry, I'm losing signal occasionally, so hopefully I'll be okay. So hi everybody, I am Susan Webster and I'm the Head of Policy and Campaigns at MND Scotland. Our charity supports people with motor neuron disease and their families. There's just 2 of us in our team, myself and Colette, who's also here today, and we're going to be recruiting for another policy officer in the coming weeks, so please do look out for that if you know anybody who might be interested in applying. As you may know, MND is a rapidly progressing and terminal neurological illness with an average life expectancy of just 18 months from diagnosis. So much of our work focuses on the need for people with the illness to be prioritised for services, because without that, they risk never receiving what they need in time. I've been in post for the last 10 years with MND Scotland, and I've led a few campaigns over that time. And issues that we have campaigned on include social security benefits, funding for MND research, access to communications equipment, and charging for social care. Alice asked before us joining this event that we highlight campaigns that have gone well and those that have perhaps gone less well. So I was going to outline our campaigning on social security, as I feel like that would probably be the most helpful. So back in 2013, when all social security benefits were administered by the UK government's DWP, we campaigned on how people with MND were failing to receive their benefits quickly enough. And that was because of the DWP's special rules, which quite clearly specified that to be fast-tracked for benefits, you had to prove that you only had 6 months left to live. With MND, that's actually a very difficult thing to do. It's easier with some cancers, for example, but with MND, it's very difficult to prove that you're in that last 6 months of life. And what that meant was that people with MND, with this incredibly short life expectancy, weren't getting the benefits they needed in time, and tragically, some people were dying before they actually received them at all. So we had great press coverage of the issue at the time, but we didn't actually achieve the changes that we needed, largely because this campaign was aimed at a Conservative-led UK government, and it was against a backdrop of a policy of austerity, as well as the Welfare Reform Act of 2012. However, moving on quickly to 2016 and the Scotland Act, and the devolution of several social security benefits to Scotland through the Social Security Scotland Bill in 2018, we knew we had another chance at this and a really golden opportunity to achieve change. So we joined forces with Marie Curie in Scotland, another small policy team of just 2 people, and we knew that we had to ensure that this 6-month rule, which was causing so many problems for people with MND, was not transferred into the new Scottish Social Security policy, which was to be based on fairness, dignity and respect. And this was actually much more difficult than you might expect, because the Scottish Government were keen to have a seamless transition of benefits from the DWP to the new Scottish agency, which was yet to be set up. So together, the 2 charities carried out an intense period of lobbying, campaigning and PR activity through the 3 stages of the bill passing through Parliament. This included working on amendments to the bill with opposition MSPs and the Social Security Committee, providing MSPs with evidence-led briefings for debates, as well as securing broad sector, third sector and clinician support for our campaign. Extensive press work, engaging our supporters and enabling them to lobby their own MSPs as well. And finally, right at the end of stage 3, we were finally successful in achieving our aim, which was a fair definition of terminal illness in the legislation. So that was passed just at the very last minute. So after all these years, starting back in 2013 with the UK government, finally in 2018, after a lot of hard work, we were able to see that campaign come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was that's a really interesting insight into that campaign and why you did it, and how you achieved success on that. So thank you for that, Susan, and also within your 5 minutes. And so our final panelist we're delighted to have today is Una Farrell from the Migraine Trust. Una, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So I'm Una Farrell from the Migraine Trust, and we are a very small organisation. There's only 11 of us, but we have a lot of people who need our help. 1 in 7 people have migraine, and it can affect them in many different ways, but it often has a very serious impact on their life. And I joined the charity 5 years ago, and the context of that has sort of been the context for our campaigning, because it was a very positive development. There was the first drug, preventive, that was developed to treat migraine, had just been developed just 5 years ago, just before I joined. So that was a very, very positive development, because prior to that, anyone who needed a preventive could only take drugs that were developed for other conditions and repurposed for migraine. And they were varied in their effectiveness, but also there were some side effects that were very negative for people. So the first year and a half, my time at the Migraine Trust, these drugs were going through the SMC and the NICE process, and so some of the drugs in this class were then approved. So it really highlighted a problem then for people with migraine in the healthcare system, not just in terms of access to these drugs, but just in their overall treatment, because many people who were eligible for these drugs just were really struggling to access them. So 3 years ago, we sort of the embryonic campaign, we issued freedom of information requests to throughout the UK, so to health boards in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and then to the CCSs in England. And obviously the healthcare system is changing now. It's refiguring, so that complicated things, and so did COVID. But it was quite clear that what we were hearing on our helpline, what people were telling us, there was huge numbers of people who were eligible for these drugs and who migraine was having a very, very serious impact on their life, and they were just not able to access them. So we issued a report called Dismissed for Too Long in September 2021 for Migraine Awareness Week, and that really highlighted the problem. And also the other research that we were doing, it highlighted there was 3 key problems for people with migraine in the healthcare system. It was taking years for them to have a diagnosis. They were going to their GP with head pain and they were being assessed for brain tumors, other things, but often migraine just wasn't assessed. So obviously that meant that they couldn't even start treatment. And they weren't, people who needed to be referred to secondary and tertiary care weren't. And then people who needed these new drugs that were finally, after, there was a drug, a preventive, developed to treat people with migraine, they were struggling to access it. So we got a lot of, launched the report that week in 2021 and got a very good media coverage. And as Ross was saying, it was very useful to send templates to MSPs, MPs, MLAs. But what we found also very effective was actually sending them some text for social media so they could tweet support for the campaign. It just created a sort of a momentum, because obviously a week launching a report is only one thing. You have to keep it going. And we had there was various things that we, achieving, speeding up diagnosis, increasing access to drugs. These are all big things, and we knew we weren't going to achieve them quickly, but it was about building the momentum and really building a group of stakeholders who wanted to help you. So over the last year and a half, we've had parliamentary events. So we had a drop-in event at the Scottish Parliament in the Northern Ireland in Stormont, in the Welsh Assembly, and also in Westminster. And it's really about just building a group of politicians who can help you, but also understanding who's interested in migraine, and where they can. There've been several debates in the Welsh Parliament as a result of the support that we've built. But it's still very, very early days, and we're now doing research for another report that will be coming out this September to see what's changed. And we do know anecdotally that there has been success in terms of access to the new drugs, but still there's still some parts of the country where people are struggling to be referred to secondary and tertiary care, which is obviously a big obstacle to accessing these drugs and then not receiving them. So there has been some success, and also working with the Neurological Alliance, which is a brilliant organisation to work with. NNAG has developed a new pathway. We worked with them, pathway for headache and migraine patients. So that's been very positive. And some of the work that we've done has informed that as well. So there's, I think when you're planning a campaign, you look for different wins along the way, and what, for example, launching a report, you hope to get coverage, you hope you get buy-in, and then also mileage out of that. So when you go to drop-in events for parliamentarians, but it really is about being realistic about what needs to be done and working in coalition. You can't do it by yourself as an organisation. You need your community. You need the people you're trying to help. You need the specialists, but you need people in other patient organisations who are probably experiencing the same things as those you're trying to help as well. So I think campaigns are complicated. I think it's about being realistic, it's about planning them, but it's also being agile enough. If some great opportunity comes along, someone suddenly wants to help you who you didn't know of, but they did have the condition that you're trying to help people with. I think that is I'd say that's what I'd say to people. Just planning, but being realistic, but agile to take advantage of things that come along.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Una. That was very detailed, and I've been busy writing things down to ask you later, because that's made me think of lots of things to add in. So what we're going to do now, we've done the introductions. We are now going to move to some preset questions that the panelists will answer. And once we've gone through that, we'll open it up to the floor to see what other questions you guys might have for our panel. So the first question that we have is, what are the do's and don'ts of a successful campaign? And Una, I'm going to put this one over to you first.
I think the key thing to a campaign is having, not just having a campaign for the sake of having one, to actually have a very clear reason what needs to change, because that gives you your hook, that gives you your momentum. But I think it's also being prepared so that even if an organisation, because through their helpline, if they know there's an issue, but you've really got to prove it. So it's doing the research. And I know, you know, with charities, we often don't have a lot of money, but there are ways that you don't have to spend much money, such as freedom of information requests, surveys that you can run yourself, or even, you know, working with the Neurological Alliance that runs its own surveys, and just, you know, seeing what data they have available. So it's really building the case, making sure that the community, that you have case studies. So it's not just having the data that really helps in terms of media coverage, but it's having the people who can give the human side of it. What does this mean for a person in their life with that condition? So it's then having experts. So it's often with patient organisations, it can be some of your trustees who'd be an expert, and they're often the person who's been leading the research, or who really has been sort of fighting the case for the condition within the country. And it's just having as many things ready as possible. So, and then deciding when you're going to launch and what you're going to do, but also the follow-ups. So it's not just a case about having a great launch, it's actually deciding what's going to happen in the months afterwards, and keeping up that research and keeping up that data gathering and that story gathering to keep the momentum going. So I'd say that it's having, again, a campaign, a very clear reason why you're running a campaign, and really building that case, because it might be obvious to you, but it's to convince and to change other people's minds and hearts.
And off the back of that, then, in terms of the clear reason and being realistic, I'm just being mindful of that. In terms of timing for a campaign, is there an ideal length of time you think makes a campaign more successful or not? I think you've got to think in 3-5 years scales, and even then it could be just in 5 years. It could be, say, a diagnosis rate that it's it's reduced by 5-10%, improved by 5-10%. But then you've got to have milestones that you know, 3 months after launch, 6 months after launch. But also to think about politically what's happening in the country, and also what's happening for your condition. Is there other breakthroughs on the horizon? Is there going to be a general election? How can you capitalize on that? You know, what contacts you already have. So, but I do, you know, unless you're very, very lucky, it's going to take years to achieve the change that you want. And also, again, you know, access to some of these drugs. That some things should move quicker than others. So it's actually identifying what should change quite quickly within the space of a year or 2 years, and what will take longer over 3-5 years, because you need to plan for them. It could be that, you know, working with the Royal College of General Physicians, you know, that's all, you know, most patient organizations want to do something with them. So realistically, what could you have achieved in 5 years? But that will have massive, you know, if you do something successful with them, that could have massive implications for people with your condition who aren't even born. So if something changes in the curriculum, with the training, that will have a huge impact, but you might not see it at your time when you're working at the organisation. Okay, thank you. And yeah, we'll come on to that later with measuring success, but that's really helpful. Susan, I wonder if you could answer the same question. What, in your opinion, are the do's and don'ts of a successful campaign?
Okay, thank you. Well, again, I'm going to focus on the do's rather than the don'ts. I think one of the most important things that you can do when developing a campaign is to devise a campaign strategy and a plan right at the outset. And I think that the most useful tool to help you to do that is the theory of change model. The theory of change model forces you to think about impact, the change that you want to see in the lives of the people that you support, and to examine if the activities that you're actually planning are likely to deliver that change. So through that process, you start thinking about the impact that you're striving for, and from that, what you think the key aim of your campaign should be. And then you work back the way, and you're outlining desired outcomes, activities, and resources that you're going to need as well. And it takes time and careful consideration, because you want to be really sure that, as I say, the activities that you are planning are the right ones for the change that you're trying to achieve. So NCVO, that's the national equivalent of SCVO, they have a book called The Good Guide to Campaigning and Influencing by Brian Lamb, and I think that's a really, really helpful resource to everything to do with campaigning, but particularly theory of change, and that's it there, if you can see that. So I think that would be the first thing that I would say. It's a really, really good place to start, particularly if you're new to campaigning. Like Una, I think working in partnership where possible is really incredibly helpful. Our two most recent campaigns and most successful campaigns on social security and also funding for MND research were partnership campaigns. It's particularly helpful if you're a small team, but it's also really helpful if you're facing reasonably strong resistance from government. We face quite strong resistance from government for both of these campaigns. So actually being part of a partnership can really help with that as well. And also, as Una said, seeking external support from for your campaigns. Third sector and medical professional support should be doable for all the neurological charities. We had the public support of 19 charities and 60 medical professionals and academics for our social security campaign, and that made an enormous difference. And most importantly of all, in terms of support for your campaign, include those with really highlighting lived experience. If you've got people with lived experience, they can bring real life to your campaign by showing how issues which can potentially seem maybe a bit removed to some people can have a really devastating impact on their lives. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's first question. So second question we have, and Susan, I've got you targeted for this one, is how do you measure and deliver success?
Yeah, well, that really follows on from the theory of change that I was talking about. So if you have developed a theory of change for your campaign, you should be able to use that to evaluate the success of it, because you basically build that into your plan. So for example, you might see from your work that you've delivered on some of the outcomes in your plan that you've set, you know, for example, maybe successfully raising profile of a particular issue or of your charity. But you can see from your theory of change that you haven't actually managed to deliver the overall change or aim that you're striving for. So this could be a partial but not a complete success. And if your theory of change is a living document and something that you refer back to and modify as you go along, you've got the opportunity to try out new tactics and activities to try and achieve that ultimate change that you're aspiring to. And again, NCVO's guide has a really helpful section on evaluation, and they've actually got a whole book devoted to evaluating campaigns as well. So I think it's really thinking about how you're going to evaluate your campaign and building that into the process right at the beginning, so that you know if you're achieving what you're trying to achieve, and if not, you can try and modify it as you go along and find new ways of trying to get there.
Thank you very much. We are now going to talk about creativity. And Ross, a question for you is, what are the most creative ways you've used to reach a target audience?
Yeah, so this is pretty creative, I guess, in the sense of it's definitely not something you normally do, I guess, but it was me trying to think outside the box a little bit. So when I worked at, and yeah, hopefully this can be applied in some way, but when I worked at St Johnstone Football Club, and I was part of media and comms manager there, but marketing was a big part of that role as well. And we had a particular issue that we could not, especially for the matches where the opposition wasn't maybe as glamorous as other clubs, and we had a particular issue trying to get particularly kids and families along to these matches. So we had a game the end of January so 2017 now, against St Johnstone against Hamilton Accies, and Hamilton Accies would bring kind of one of the lowest attendances in the league. So it'd usually be an average crowd about 2,500, like probably best estimate with that. So yeah, I thought we're going to have to really target to get kids and families along, and I thought the best way to do that is to try to think of ways to creatively target kids, and because if kids are excited about coming to this match, and they're going to speak to their parents or guardians and try and come along to the game. So I thought about different ways to do that. So thought about making the game quite an exciting one to come along. So we gave it a theme which was painted blue, and we got all the players wearing like blue and white kind of face paint of the team colours and things for promotional pictures and the launch part of it. And we also came up with a video, which the idea was for it to go viral, and it definitely did. So there's a video of the St Johnstone players lip syncing to, again, with the theme of the campaign, which is blue. So I don't know if you know a song by Eiffel 65 called Blue Dabba. So we got I don't know how I managed it, but I managed to convince the players to do a lip sync to that song. I filmed it. We also in the video we got all the kids from the supporters club involved as well. So we made all the kids like feel part of it. And we kind of used that video when we did a lot of our school engagement as well. So even when you went into the schools, the kids had already seen it on YouTube and things, and we're singing it when we were playing it in the schools. And I used a few contacts that STV and BBC as well that I had. So we managed to get the video shown on Scotland Tonight, and as the kind of one last thing that they usually have. And it was also picked up by Match of the Day Kickabout, which is like a kids version of Match of the Day. So including those two shows and with the YouTube views and social media, it got seen by over 250,000 people, which was pretty amazing. So we got would it be 25% increase on the attendance that we were expecting for that match. So that was just sort of a creative way by using a viral video and trying to make a theme for it as well, and really focusing on that. And we made it part of the attraction of the game was, just coming to the game, you're going to get there's going to be free like face painters there as well, so that the kids could have their face painted blue in the same way the players were in the promotional stuff. So yeah, there's a little bit out there, but it worked really well, and it was definitely a little bit creative as well.
And was that creativity in order to save costs, or was that creativity in order to engage with a difficult audience? Or both?
A bit of both. There wasn't much of a marketing budget there, so you really had to try and maximise what you had. So yeah, I guess in the sense of having, I did a lot of videos at the club, so we did lots of like kind of player interviews and things. So it was really about trying to maximise that, I guess, the best way possible. And like I said, it was quite a hard audience to reach because kids aren't really on social media and things like that. So we tried to just kind of do it indirectly. I thought if there's going to be a video that's going to be just so different that's going to be picked up by people, then the target audience of the kids and the families are going to become aware of it. And that's what thankfully happened.
Yeah, fantastic. Love that. The next question is, if a campaign should lead to an outcome, what happens when that outcome isn't achieved? And Emily, over to you for this one.
Thank you. Yeah. So I mean, I think if you've got an outcome and you've got this goal and it doesn't get achieved, I think the key thing is don't give up and just carry on. If there's improvements that can be made for people suffering from any kind of, whatever your neurological condition is that you're representing, just try and get some kind of change. I mean, our goal was to reinstate specialist nurses, MS, epilepsy and Parkinson's nurses. And we did, unfortunately we didn't achieve the reinstatement of these nurses. But alongside the loss of the nurses, there was also a reduction in hours available for neurological nurses, the general nurses, and numerous other changes as well. So though the campaign carried on to try and get specialist nurses reinstated, we kept going to try and improve what service there was going to be. So trying to ensure that the loss in hours didn't happen. So now, rather than going to 2 part-time generalist neurological nurses, we've actually achieved to have got 2 full-time neurological nurses plus hours from the head nurse as well. So we've actually managed to have a benefit there. But I think just carry on as well. If you don't achieve that goal, look at what benefits and improvements you can make, and then keep going and try and get some kind of improvements in other ways as well. So we've managed to get much better communication between the Western Isles Health Board and patients on the islands. Before we were working on the campaign, some of the patients on the islands hadn't been in touch with a neurological nurse or a neurologist for 4 or more years, and now the team of neurology nurses are actually going around and phoning each patient individually. And it's going to take a long time, but there are improvements there. And we've also managed to get the Western Isles Health Board to come along to Neuro Hebrides meetings on a regular basis, so they're feeding back and listening to the problems that any patients are dealing with, and trying to get direct contact between the patients and the health board, and try and improve what service there is available to them. So I think, yeah, if you don't achieve that original goal, just try and keep going and see what benefits and improvements you can get for people.
That's really heartening to hear, I think, and shows that the value of ongoing pressure on things that you can still change and deliver on, that maybe weren't front of mind at the beginning of what you're trying to achieve. But actually that's a massive improvement, moving to 2 full-time from 2 part-time. So
well, we've got 2 full-time and then some hours from the Western Isles Health. But also I think we haven't got a set finish time for this campaign, so we're not giving up, and we want to carry on trying to get improvements. We've only got 2 full-time nurses that cover 10 islands. That's still not very many hours really available to people on the whole of the chain of islands, because it's quite a lot of travel involved and things like that. So we're still going to carry on to try and get even more improvements, maybe get more nurses in the future. So we haven't got an end date. Don't necessarily, if you're trying to campaign, say we haven't achieved it by Christmas, so we can't do it anymore. You've just got to carry on and keep trying to make little inroads and try and continue to get improvements and get your voice heard.
thank you very much. And I should add, if anyone wants to add anything to what's being discussed in the chat box, there's a few things already there, but if you have anything you want to add or questions you want to note down for later, then go ahead and use the chat box. We are now going to move on to the energy behind a campaign. So we talked about this a bit earlier, and the importance, I think it was Uno who was saying that actually one of the most fundamental parts of running a campaign is to build that the people behind you, so not the audience, but the people who are on the same page, who are driving forward the campaign. So how do you do that? How do you drive energy behind a campaign, and how do you get the general public behind you? So Ross, I wonder if you could take this one.
Yeah, I guess kind of similar to the mental health campaign that we're doing at the minute. We've tried to get a good kind of group of politicians that are coming round that to really help it launch. And I guess kind of looking back as well to a previous campaign that I've worked on when I worked for Emma Harper MSP. So Emma's the South Scotland regional MSP. When I worked with her, the focus was mainly kind of around, say, Dumfries and Galloway, and she had plans to change legislation around it's an issue called livestock worrying, and it kind of goes to something I was going to maybe jump in and say around do's and don'ts of a campaign. It's like, don't assume your audience will have as much knowledge about a campaign subject as you will, and it was certainly the same with that. So with livestock worrying, is something that outside the agricultural sector, a lot of people wouldn't really have a real understanding of the term and what it definitely means. So we kind of looked at that, and it's that the issue is around dogs attacking sheep, and it affects the livestock industry for it's like just over £250,000 every year in Scotland. So it's quite a big issue. Every day there'll be an incident of dogs attacking sheep in some way in Scotland on average. So it's an issue that when we first approached it and looked at it and around changing the livestock, the legislation around it, and to try and put focus on it as an issue, it was really to try and think about how do we get more people interested and knowledgeable and have an understanding of this issue. So I looked at it and we thought about we can get the the perspective of farmers, which is obviously a big part of it, but it's also what does livestock worry in terms of dogs attacking sheep? Who does it also affect? If obviously it'd be interested people with animal welfare concerns, the Sheep Association, police, the council, dog walkers, even myself as a dog walker is something that maybe I wouldn't have thought about before, but all these different aspects of it. So what we did is we had an instant where we arranged a meeting between Emma and a farmer in Argyll and Bute who was particularly affected by this. He'd lost 17 sheep to a dog attack in one instance. So a really kind of hard-hitting case around it. And then what we did is we organised a summit, if you like. We got the local police, local council, local MSP along, the Scottish Farmer magazine, the Scottish SPCA along, and things like that. So it was really about trying to get all these different aspects and perspectives on this one issue to then communicate that to a much wider audience of people. So it started off as just farmers, it's an issue for farmers, but we made it a much broader issue, and the language around it as well. So instead of talking about it as livestock worrying, which is a term that farmers would understand, talking about it as a case of dogs attacking sheep. Let's just kind of be open about that and use that as the language for using it about attacking and trying to educate people around that subject, so people have an understanding of it. And I think that it did really help to broaden the energy around that campaign and leading to the consultation that Emma had. Just to briefly say that we had a target there was a consultation for the legislation, and it was important to get a high number of responses to this consultation for it to get a bit of legitimacy and to be taken forward to change the law, which eventually happened. We had the target of 85 responses to the consultation, which is what a similar level of responses that another MSP had on a similar issue to this, but we managed to get 1,053 around that. And I think a big part of that, which is like 12 times the original target we had for it, was around trying to get all these different perspectives. And I think that really did bring energy to that campaign of an issue that probably a lot of people, including people in this call, probably wouldn't have really thought about before.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm amazed that you got quite so many. So good. That's incredible result. I wonder if we can also put this over to Susan about how do you get energy behind the campaign and drive it forwards.
Yes, yeah, I mean, for us, the key things are probably kind of three key things: press coverage, using social media, and again, as I touched on earlier, highlighting lived experience as well. And we've always had pretty extensive sort of press coverage of our campaigns, and I think it's a really good way to galvanise energy about your campaign and to gain, broad public sector support as well. It can really massively raise the profile of the issue and your charity as well. And speaking to the media can be daunting, especially when you do it relatively infrequently, which most of us in charities, that's the case. As a charity, we've identified our key media spokespeople and we've invested in media training for them. Now that can be expensive, but we feel that it's been really worthwhile just to give the people that are to do that just the confidence to carry that off. And also, I think investing time and energy in how to write a good press release is also really worthwhile too. Broadcast media coverage is particularly helpful because of its reach, but it also gives you the opportunity to use clips of that within your social media channels as well, which makes them much more interesting and engaging. And we use social media extensively on our campaigns and lobbying activity as well, particularly Twitter, of course. And as I touched on earlier, last but not least, really highlighting the lived experience of the people that you're supporting. So in terms of MND, only 450 people have the illness at any one time. So most of the general public won't actually have personal experience of it. But if somebody with the illness or a bereaved carer, for example, is able to
Is it just me, or have we lost Susan's voice? Yeah.
Share their story.
We lost you there.
Am I back?
Susan. Yeah, you're back.
Sorry, keeps flashing, unstable connection. So yeah, I was just really talking about highlighting, people with lived experience. Because as I've seen, only relatively small number of people, 450 people at any one time, have MND. people don't have that, if it's not like, say, cancer, where people, you know, people always know somebody that's had the illness or sadly passed away with the illness, MND is really quite different. But if people, if you have like media, you know, people that you support that are happy to talk to the media, just in moments they can get across the impact of the illness and the issues that they are facing that you're trying to highlight really clearly. And we found, you know, that can really help generate really, really positive public engagement and understanding as well of what you're trying to achieve.
It sounds like actually the most important thing are the people with MND or the carers, because you then use them in the press coverage, you then use them in the social media, you then use them in the clips from on the TV, which can be shortened and put on social media. So actually it all boils down to finding those people who are willing to speak. And from experience, I know that is quite difficult to do, because it's asking people to open up very vulnerably publicly. And so actually your pool of people who'd be willing to be case studied is not as big as the number of people who obviously have those conditions. So actually another part of it is in perhaps knowing how to find a case study and look after them and ensure that they're protected through their experience in the press as well.
That's right. And you know, to be fair, most journalists are very good at supporting people as well in that situation, you know, that you know, particularly kind of broadcast journalists, you know, that so, but yes, and we would never ever try and persuade somebody to tell their story. It very much has to come from them. And some people feel quite strongly, some people really want to do it, and others just wouldn't be able to consider it at all. But as you say, yeah, supporting them through that process and afterwards is really, really important.
So question for you, but also for everyone else, is how do you know who would be prepared? Like, do you do a call out, or when you need to have someone, do you know who would already be willing? Has someone already said, look, if you ever need someone to talk about this, I'm willing to do it? Or how do you reach out to people?
I think for us, it tends to be people that you've got a personal relationship with already. So for example, the last kind of big media coverage that we had was when we launched our accessible housing report last year. And that report had a lot of input from people with MND and bereaved carers. And we also had a number of focus groups as well, and conversations with people to feed into that report. And just from these conversations, various conversations, we were able to, you know, identify people who we felt would, you know, had a really good story to tell and would be comfortable doing it. And that's not to say that people didn't get very upset when they were doing it. They did, but they were able to still go ahead with that and deal with it at the time, even though it was really challenging for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you for that. The next question is about using people who are famous or well-known, who are well-known faces, celebrities or MSPs, MPs in campaigns. So the question is, how useful are they? And directed to Ross, first of all, can you share an example of where you've worked successfully with a celebrity or a politician, and perhaps another example where you've not had such success, if you've got one? But certainly starting with a success story would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think whether it's politicians or if you're like a celebrity, it's really about, I think, a big part of it can be around just getting media coverage. So talking about it, that Susan's mentioned there about the importance of broadcast interest. I think that if you have a celebrity, so for example, if we had, I don't know, Chris Hoy or something that was helping with our mental health campaign or something, I imagine there'd be a bit more interest in it just because there's somebody that's a well-known face in the media in Scotland. So that I think there's an importance that can bring to it. I guess an extension of what I was talking about earlier when saying about the engagement we've had so far with the mental health and epilepsy campaign and the steps we've taken to involve MSPs around that, and with the template press releases as well. I think an important extension as well is the engagement with MPs as well and councillors. I know that, for example, with epilepsy and mental health, these are areas that are devolved to the Scottish Parliament, but there's still obviously an interest there from MPs representing Scottish constituencies, and there's that profile that they have to hopefully try and extend the message. And with the template press releases as well, again, just from seeing it from the politician's office side, as specific as those template press releases can be to the constituency, the better. There's a lot of ones I would have seen in the past where it's pretty much like a national one that's just really just got the interchangeable name of the politician, but if you can obviously include the constituency, but something relevant to the constituency as well, that really does go a long way and is far more likely for the politician to pick up. And yeah, also hand in hand with that, it's not just press coverage, it's the social media reach that they can have as well as part of that. And yeah, with councillors, engagement with councillors as well across the country around this. And we've done that to some extent with this campaign. Councillors are great at trying to raise awareness of a subject, but they also go to quite a lot of, say, community council meetings, lots of local group meetings that are related to maybe the issue that you're talking about as well. So there's lots of contacts that even councillors might have. So when you're thinking about politicians, it's not just MPs and MSPs, it's councillors as well. That's helpful.
Yeah, and do you have any examples of when you've worked with a celebrity or someone who, and it just hasn't been as, you haven't hit those measurables that you're hoping for, or do you think, generally speaking, they know they know what's needed of them? You've provided the press release or the story, and generally speaking, it's not something we should worry about encountering pitfalls in.
I guess it's just that you can just try and do your best with it. So, for example, with the epilepsy and mental health campaign, because there was engagement from a current MSP and former MP, I was hoping we might have got some broadcast interest in that, but it wasn't there. But you know, you kind of do your best with that. And I suppose there's the balance of it as well, because sometimes if you were to try to like rope in a celebrity into something like that, you're sort of taking it away from what the issue is as well, that you're trying to promote and get people engaged with as well. So it's a kind of a balance to be struck with that. But I guess you can just kind of just do your best to try and get as much coverage around an issue as possible.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Ross. So we're moving on to the final question of our precept questions, and then we'll open it up to members of the meeting. So the final question, which I'm going to ask two of you, is how do you run a campaign on a shoestring budget? And Una, I'd like to put this one to you.
Hi, so it always helps if you've got some money, you know, so you can conduct research, you can, there's omnibus polls that take place every week and you can add some questions to them, but they're quite expensive. But just sort of to reiterate some things I've mentioned, you know, you do freedom of information requests, you know, building a good case study database of people who can actually talk about their experience to the media, but also if you produce a report, you know, if you've got the money to have the report designed, but if not, it's something that, you know, most people could format themselves and for it to look quite slick, which wouldn't cost any money. But it's really the content. So if you've got good research, you can run your own surveys. SurveyMonkey, you can have the free version of it as such to run surveys. The Canva, you can use Canva, so that's something that there's a paid for version that it's kind of more bells and whistles, but there's a free version where you can actually design your own graphics that you can use. It could be for the report, it could be for social media, and then sort of Ross, you know, talked about it, you know, contacting politicians, you know, sending them press release templates. Of course, nothing to draft a press release, and even if you're not experienced in that, you can look at other organisations' press releases. So there's quite a lot of guides. It's very much a template, really, anyhow. But you can you know, send them with social media text and the graphics that you've made to politicians. But it's also getting your community, getting the buy-in. So letting, you know, having meetings with as many of your stakeholder group in advance of the launch of the campaign, so that they're ready, that they have what they need to contact their parliamentarians, to talk about it in social media, and also they can send letters to the editor of their local newspapers, but then also be available to be case studies. So a lot of the really important content, you don't need money. It always does help if you've got a bit more, just to make things a bit slicker. But I mean, what helps these days, I mean, you can have a roundtable discussion. It used to be that you had to organise a room, either you'd have it in your offices or you had to hire something. These days you can organise a Zoom and have a roundtable discussion that way, and it's also easier to have people attend, to have a high-profile speaker or someone to chair it, because it's just easier. So it's taking advantages of how things have changed as well.
And I suppose the flip side for that question is, if you had an unlimited budget, what would be your dream thing to spend it on?
Research. Research, that would be the thing, yeah.
Can I just put that to all four of you? So Ross, what would you, if you had an unlimited budget, what would be your priority?
Well, what I was just going to say with regards to the budget, if there was the scope for it, something when I first came into the charity had been put together was a group of videos made, but professionally by, I think it's Urban Croft in Glasgow, around promoting the different support services of Epilepsy Scotland, and they're all fantastic. And there was one in particular that was, it was just, I was really struck by it when I first started working the charity. It gave me a real understanding of what the experience of can be for somebody living with epilepsy, and we used it as part of our Christmas appeal. It's called Philip's Story, and I'd really recommend anybody have a look at that. But that was something that was paid for by the charity as something to use. And if we hadn't had that, I don't think the Christmas appeal, or even just to try to promote and raise awareness of our services, would have been the same if we didn't have that kind of, I don't want to use the word slick, but it was a really well put together group of videos, and I think they're really worthwhile to put an investment into videos in that way where it's going to be needed.
Brilliant. Susan, what are your thoughts if you had an unlimited budget?
Probably more staff. Probably because I think actually you can have really good research and people agree with you, politicians agree with what you're saying, but you don't have the resources to, I think sometimes it requires that continuous lobbying, continuous reminding of the issue and why it's important. And I think that can be, when you're a small team, to be able to maintain that can actually be quite challenging. So if I had extra money, it'd be a bigger team so that we could keep that pressure and influence on the people that are ultimately making the decisions at the end of the day.
Thank you. And Emily, over to you. Can you first of all tell us about running a campaign on a shoestring, and then tell us what you would do if you had unlimited funds?
So I think the key thing about running a campaign on a shoestring is to work in partnership whenever you can. We had this Neurohebrides campaign, but it would have been absolutely nothing without the help of the MS Society and Parkinson's Scotland and Epilepsy Scotland. They have got such experience and knowledge in campaigning that they were absolutely crucial in this. And I'm, as I said before, relatively new into the post and limited experience in campaigning. So I think working with other people and contacting other people is crucial at helping you to do it on a shoestring. And other ways of doing it is just get yourself out there on social media and email campaigns, and use people who have got the living experience, like people have said. We're a very small charity, so we get to know our members really quite well. So we know who would be willing to talk to people in campaign and people who are not really quite so comfortable doing it. So email campaigns, Canva, social media, and I wrote to every small newspaper that we had available out on the island, all the little newsletters that go out in the community. So just try and get your name out there. And most of it didn't cost anything at all from my side of it. If I had an unlimited budget, I completely agree with Susan, and it would be more people, because I'm the only member of staff for Neurohebrides, and I'm part-time, so there's limited amount of time and I can put onto any kind of campaign, so more staff would be absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, that was really lovely. It's the end of our set questions. Over to you guys. Let's see if you've got any questions you'd like to put to the panel. So George, you've got your hand up, and would you like to introduce yourself, and then if it's for one person, direct it to that person, if it's for all of them,
George Allen. I'm chair of the Scottish Post Polio Network, and I would just love to have staff. Anyway, we've been talking quite a lot about using people's lived experience. I just wonder how you protect people who will go out there, because I mean, we're campaigning because things aren't right, so therefore there must be something wrong. So if you're then saying this isn't right, this is wrong, then when you've got a sort of limited number of people in the field, then they're easily identified, and then there can be repercussions. I can give an example of an orthotics conference where a young lady stood up and criticised her health board, and after the conference, her surgeon called her in, specialist called her in, and gave her a right telling off for saying, well, why are you saying that we are bad, when in actual fact all she was doing was telling the truth. So that's the question: how do you protect folk who are prepared to come up above the parapet?
And who's your question for? Is it for all four?
Whoever would like to give an opinion.
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, cheers, George. I think really important question, and that comes up a lot, and within Epilepsy Scotland as well, about when we're going to put somebody into the media spotlight in some way, or even kind of using quotes and things on social media or through our website, and to make sure that they're protected. So there's got to be I suppose that the process that we follow would be around the person within the charity, maybe who's kind of closest to the person we're thinking about trying to, who wants to be that voice, to make sure that they understand the implications of it. Could be for a number of reasons, could be to do with their benefits or anything like that. So just make sure that they're comfortable with doing it completely. It's hard though, that I think that if somebody is happy to do that, and they understand that there's going to be that there could be things that kind of come back from it. I think that it's just in those situations, like the situation you described, it's hard to prevent maybe somebody criticising somebody for doing something, but we'd have to make sure on our side, on the charity side, that the person's completely comfortable doing it and that they can be supported to do that as well. I mean, obviously there's like disclosure and things through like forums that you could do to make sure the person's absolutely happy for their story, their voice to be used. And there's other ways around it as well. It doesn't need to be a person, you don't need to use the person's name or their face. It could be an anonymous comment they're making, quote they're making. That's something we've used quite a few times on social media and within reports as well. And that's another way to do it and just making sure that there's nothing in the quote or that would give away the identity of the person. That's helpful.
I would, sorry, I was just going to say, I would totally agree with what Ross said there. We've used, so for example, we had an accessible housing report last year where we had, it was, quotes throughout the whole report, and they were all anonymous, and there was, a person living with MND or a bereaved carer was at the side, and what that anonymity allowed people to be really honest, to actually say what they would never say to a camera or to their health professional or care worker, and that actually made these quotes incredibly powerful because of that, because they didn't have to be public. And I think that the person that I was talking about earlier who spoke to the media following the launch of that report was actually a bereaved carer. So she was in the position where she wasn't actually going through that process anymore. They'd already had their terrible experience, and her husband had sadly passed away. So she was in a position where she wasn't kind of at risk of poorer treatment from those that were providing her services. So yeah, I think it's just been very mindful of it, and just ensuring that people are really, really comfortable with what they're doing and choosing not to do as well.
Oh, thank you. Keith, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Alice. My question is for anybody that would like to answer. We've all spoken, or you've all spoken about getting the community involved and how much that adds strength to the campaign that you're running, and say it's something that we do at the MS Society as well. But one of the things that I hope we're getting better at, but one of the things that I still think we could do better is feeding back to the people that are involved in these campaigns, especially when you're doing a piece of research. So again, you're talking about doing your consultations and research and also your campaign. You're asking people to share their views, and it's a long, generally the campaign's running for quite some time. So how do you feed back throughout that process to let people know what you're doing with the information they share with you? And if your long-term goal is going to take 3 or 4 years, how do you keep them involved so that they don't go, well, actually, why would I keep doing that when I've answered that before and I don't see any benefit from it? So it's just see if you get any thoughts on how I could steal that would help us be better than we are just now.
Well, I would say there's different ways. So if you've been directly in contact with someone, you might give them sight of the, say, a report or something before it's been published. You might brief them, because also they might possibly be a case study for it, but just make them feel involved. And also it's good to share things with people who've been directly involved ahead of time, because there could be something they point out that could be improved. But in terms of the wider community, I think it's important to have like a regular update. So it could be in the monthly e-bulletin that they're just informed about every step or every success, and also that it's clear that a success, it's a result of the work that you've been doing together, that a meeting that's been secured or a debate, and even sharing, something that, say, for a report's been downloaded a high number of times from the website, just letting people know so that it's not just kept internally, so that people can see the fruits of the support that they've been giving you. So I think it's just regular updates, with depending on how involved people have been, but not just presuming that people will see the success every 6 months, every year, when you're having some big event or some big media activity, that they're shown all the different milestones as you go along.
I would agree with everything you've just said as well. I throughout the campaign, I've updated all of the Neuro Hebrides members every couple of weeks just to say what's going on. And it really makes people feel really involved in what's going on. And then I think people are more willing to help get involved in the future if you update them regularly as well.
I would also say just thanking them, just really acknowledging that it's because, if someone took time to fill out a survey, if they took time to, write up a case study, you couldn't do it without them, and you're doing it for them, and you're doing it because of this is what they want. This is what people have called for. It's not just a team in an office deciding what they think needs to happen. It's actually because the community is telling them these are the issues. I think that thanking them and acknowledging their input.
I don't know if any of the other panelists want to come in, but if not, we will move to Mary. We need to unmute, Mary, we need to unmute you. That's it.
There. The question I would like to answer is going back to how do you start a campaign? How do you keep a campaign going? Now, it'll be 8 years ago this month, I started up a campaign on Facebook to get the signatures for people with essential tremor on a petition for the focus guided ultrasound to get one in Dundee, which I might say 8 years later, we have one up and running in Dundee, but the problem we have is to get the National Services Division and the Scottish Government to say yes, they'll fund it on the NHS, because at the moment they're saying they will take somebody from Scotland, and it doesn't matter whether it's the Scottish borders or Shetland, to send them to London if they require treatment. It's a 3-year waiting list to be seen in London, plus a 3-year waiting list for treatment, when it is ridiculous that we have a machine in Dundee and they won't use it. So the idea for anybody wanting to start a campaign is start it off on social media, and then it'll progress from there. I mean, the neuro consultant in Dundee actually got in touch with me, and we've been campaigning for the last 6-7 years to get this funded on the NHS, and we've actually got a drop in March in Parliament to raise more awareness, and awareness is the key thing. And you need somebody who is not afraid to speak out and speak their mind. I mean, I've got a weird nickname. I'm known as the Scottish Rottie because I'm a little ankle biter. I'll bite at ankles if I know I'm right. So
yeah,
you need something.
Sorry to cut in. I'm just looking at the time as well. But yeah, Mary, you certainly are a fantastic example of a very tenacious campaigner indeed. And the drop-in clinic, drop-in parliamentary event in March will be brilliant as well. But you've had to deal with ends of parliamentary terms and having to get things reinstated and so on and so forth. And you've never given up. So I suppose, how do you keep a campaign going is the answer to that, is tenacity in your case.
Stubbornness. Downright stubbornness.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're just going to move on now to Anna. You've got your hand up.
Yep. Hi, everyone. This is a question for anyone, really. It's just, it has been touched on a bit, but all these campaigns that we've been talking about mostly are very long term. So especially if you're not really seeing any wins, how do you keep the interest and how do you keep it going and keep people involved in it?
Who would like to come in on that?
Well, you could, I mean, sometimes it could just be for, initially, or it could be just awareness, even if there's going to be no substantive change. It could just be that, you seek media coverage around the issue, and it could be linked to the Awareness Day or something that, or you're capitalizing on something that's happened. But that in itself can just keep, it can, keep excitement and maintain some of the momentum around the campaign. But also the good thing about awareness is you never know what could happen. Someone could contact you. It could be, someone who's personally affected by the condition. It could be a celebrity, or it could be a politician who wants to work with you, or another organization. So that in itself, because sometimes you think, well, why? You can do something and get lots of media coverage and think that's great, and particularly the person who who's doing your thing, well done. But actually, what does it mean? But in itself, it's good because it raises awareness of the issue, but also it maintains excitement amongst the community. But also, it's one of those things you never quite know what can happen as a result of it. And just by doing that in itself, and you might feel it's not substantive, but it just in itself, it can be a success. But even if it doesn't move the dial on the things that need to change, it can be a very nice win.
Thanks, Una. Does anyone else want to come in on that, or are we ready to move to Jonathan? Yeah. Okay, Jonathan, over to you.
Thanks. In the chat, I've put an example of a campaign from a few years ago that is similar to what's being described, because it was about a specific piece of legislation that was imperfect as introduced, and this was a coalition designed to improve the actual legislation, and it worked. So I would use that as an example, but I guess I want to underscore two things I've heard and see if there are any other examples. I've been able to accomplish remarkably little all by myself or with just my own organization. And so a lot of campaigning, in my experience, comes down to finding who your natural allies are, even if they're ones you didn't think of to begin with, and then working with them to form a coalition. And so that I've found coalitions to be remarkably more successful than individual efforts, especially mine. But the other aspect of that is sometimes understanding that you're in for the long haul. And a couple of people have made passing reference to that, but I would like to underscore it. You know, in the example in the chat, there was an imposed deadline. There was a piece of legislation. It was going to go through stage 1, 2, 3, and that was that. And if we didn't make an impact then, it was too late. But most things that I've been involved with just require an extraordinary amount of patience and perseverance and tolerance for being told no or not yet, or getting nice words back, but no action to follow them. And just being a constant positive presence. And I'm wondering if that's been the experience of our 4 panelists, or if that doesn't make any sense in your context.
Would anyone like to go first on that?
Wow, I've left them speechless.
No. Well, I would say I think you're right. It's about finding who you can work with and who might already be moving on an issue, and also different, particularly for health conditions. There could be an organisation that is doing something related to research, another that's just focused on support, and it can just be sort of coming together and sort of seeing what you have to build a campaign together and what contacts you have. And I think, Jonathan, it's a really important point also, because something that hasn't been mentioned, making sure there's no competition between other charities or other organisations in the area that's destructive. I haven't seen it in this area, but I've seen it with other charities. And just making sure that you will, because you should all be working towards the same thing. And even if there's a different focus, and if some organisations are new, some are older, but that you know that you work together, and that you're the greater than the sum of just what you're doing individually. And I think, yeah, it's just been clever, and also the people you're trying to help will see that, and so will also the specialists, because if they see a very fractured sector, that might just be a turn off generally for working with patient organisations. So I think it is, yeah, just seeing who your allies are, and seeing how you can work together, even if you might have different focuses.
Yeah, no, thanks, and that's helpful. I guess what I've seen work is making an effort, and it is an effort, to find out how you can join the dots for people who are not automatically interested in whatever you're interested in. But that if you can join the dots with what they already care about, that makes a huge difference. And one of the things that opens up in turn is the opportunity to piggyback on things they're already doing, already trying to accomplish, so that you're doing them together. Because your point is well made. It's definitely not a great idea to be in competition with others who ought to be your allies. And so if you work hard up front to get them all on the same team, then they're not the opposition, they're on your team.
Absolutely.
So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, no, and I'd even say, for example, with migraine, because migraine, it's more common in women than men, and it often worsens during perimenopause. And there's finally there's a lot of focus now on perimenopause and menopause, and it's we're certainly thinking, well, who can we work with, who we haven't thought of before really, and who's sort of how can we sort of make sure that migraine is considered in the mix of helping women with menopause.
If I could just add something as well, I think also if you're talking about kind of looking for allies, you can potentially do that with politicians as well. So if there's, so looking for particular MSP spokespeople, people that are members of cross-party groups, MSPs that are members of cross-party groups, MSPs that are sitting on particular committees that can support you in your cause, can ask FMQs, can ask parliamentary questions, will speak at debates on your behalf, that you can brief them. So I think looking for alliances within Parliament with those MSPs that have a particular interest or responsibility in the issue that you're campaigning on can actually be really beneficial as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Susan. I think we've got time just for this one last question, Ewan.
More observation on this. If you can avoid the sort of inevitable reshuffles and reinvention of policy, one of the sort of areas where a campaign's longevity can exist or fall on is the contrast in the data. If you've got surveys, lived experience, etc., it depends how strong that is compared to the NHS data that's going to be presented as arguments for whatever the policy is that you're trying to get improved. So think that you can have all those sort of organisation and stuff approaches that you want, but if you've not got the sort of big argument to make that there's a clear need and a clear way of progressing to better service provision, then you're really sort of up against it. Okay.
Absolutely. So making your case, and then actually I wondered whether you're going to say use it as a benchmark. So if you have a report in, like for instance, the PAN UK Patient Experience Survey, which we've done for the first time in Scotland, we took part in it this time. But for us, it's a good benchmark for the next time we run it. How do those stats compare? And so I thought that's that you're also going to talk about the importance of repeating research in order to benchmark. Has anyone got anything else they want to add to, or any final questions? I've got one last poll just to see how everyone's got on today. But otherwise, that leads us to the end of our session. I'd like to say a big thank you to our 4 panelists. You've all come from very different backgrounds and experience, and it's so insightful to see the different techniques and tactics and views, and especially the creativity of it all. I think has been really interesting, and for me, just knowing that actually a campaign can take 5 years is really nice as well. It takes a bit of the pressure off that we don't have to try and affect change immediately. We must take a long-term view and be patient. So I found that particularly useful. So yeah, a big thank you to all of you, and I will just put this poll up just to see how you enjoyed it. If I can find the correct one. Here we go. And then we should be able to close the meeting with a minute or so to spare. It's completely anonymous, so don't feel worried that I'm going to see if you've rated it, how you rated it. Brilliant. Okay, well, I will end that and share the results. So thank you so much to the panelists. Everyone's enjoyed it very much, and I know we lost a few people before the end, but we'll get in touch with them and ask for their feedback as well. Hope you've enjoyed it. These are events really that are supposed to identify areas of common need and areas where we're trying to support each other with our expertise and insight. And hopefully today people have taken something away from this conversation and feel, if anything, that they're on the same page as everyone else in terms of how difficult it is to run a campaign. And we're not alone, we're all in the same boat. So thank you very, very much to all of our panelists. Thank you for attending. It's a long meeting, it's been an hour and a half. I will let you go and have your lunch now. And so, yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Alice.